Hello friends, I'm Beatriz, your host here on Beatriz Book Nook, and today I am bringing to you and going to talk to you about translations. Yes, you heard it right. This is going to be a video where I'm going to be discussing with you translations and why I think they are so important in a reader's world. Yes, I am sitting down, not usually in my corner spot, but that's because honestly, because of the theme of this video, I had to think of what I was going to say, and I kind of made up a script so I can guide myself through that and know what I'm talking about and what I want to talk about, just so you know if you see me looking down or looking to the side, that is why, because I'm trying to remember what I wrote. Then I just want to let you know of a small disclaimer. I'm going to be mainly talking about my experience and mainly talk about Portuguese in this video because, well, if you don't know, Portuguese is actually my main language, but I do believe that everything that I'm going to be saying does apply to every language in the world. May it be English, Italian, Japanese, Korean, whatever language you speak. I do think that the things that I'm going to be saying, they do apply to every language that we speak around the world, and therefore I just don't think that they are specific for Portuguese. Just to putting this disclaimer out there so you all know what we are going to be referring and where my point stands. So now let's get on with the video. Let me share with you my thoughts and opinions about translations, and yeah, I think this is it, so let's go into the video. So let me first start by explaining to you why I want to talk about translations. I recently noticed that I have been looking at the books that I'm reading not only in a way that I look at them and I feel proud of being able to read them, but at a deeper level. I have been looking at books and thinking of what is making me enjoy them. Is it the plot? Is it the vibes? Is it the writing? Until I noticed, as I said before, at the end of last year, I was deeply enjoying reading books that were translated from Korean. And it made me think and go back to when I started reading when I was a little girl, that I did not start my reading journey in English. Well, I first had to learn and read my own language to be able to then learn a second one, which is English, and that is when everything clicked inside of my head. I have been reading translations and translated books my whole life, but I never thought of it in a deeper level, and right now I am not able to stop thinking about translated books and why I honestly did stop reading them. So let's dive into it a little bit more. Let me share with you, as I said before, all my thoughts, and let's keep going on. Now that I have explained to you why I'm doing this video, let me start by telling you what I define as a translation, which I also think a lot of us define as a translation. Basically, a translation is a book that was not written in the language that you are reading it in, also known as a book that is translated from another language to the one that you are reading it in. Basically, the same thing that I just said previously. And now that I have taken the definition of translation out of the way, let's start by looking at some examples of translated books. I'm sure you can name a few out of the top of your head, but having grown up reading them, I want to share some common titles that you can see not only in schools here in Portugal, but also in a lot of the bookshops that we have around the country, and also a lot of our libraries. These types include, for example, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. This book was originally written in France. Also, everyone knows Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I am not sure in which language it was written originally, but I think it's either Russian or I cannot remember because, well, I am missing that information on my notes. Also, another one that I'm missing the information for when it was written and how and what language it was written. It's going to be The Odyssey by Homero. This is a very classic book. Everyone knows about it, and at a certain point, I'm sure someone has read it before. We also have to talk about someone that has been on the talk a lot recently because she has just won a literature Nobel Prize, which is going to be Han Kang. She wrote The Vegetarian. This is a book that is originally written from Korean. And last but definitely not least, in my first list of books that I want to mention, we have Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, which is a book that was written originally in Japanese. But although these titles from other languages that were then translated to English are very important to mention, we also have to talk about the books that were originally written in English and that are very famous, especially in my language. Everyone knows about this book. So just to mention a few authors, I want to mention Jane Austen and almost all of the books that have been translated to Portuguese. Then we also have a classic that everyone knows, everyone has probably read it or have heard of it, which is going to be Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I also want to mention, for example, Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. But if we want to talk a little bit more about recent authors and authors that have been on everyone's radar more recently, let's just say, for example, Rebecca Yarros with the Imperial series. You know, I love Fourth Wing, so this was something that I definitely wanted to mention. We also have, for example, Elsie Silver and Chestnut Springs. All of her books, at least from this series, have been already translated to Portuguese or are in the process of being translated to Portuguese. And then V. Schwab, I love her work. I read it mainly in English, not in English, in Portuguese. And The Invisible Life of Eddie LaRue is one of my favorite books ever. So all of her books have been translated to my own language. There is many more authors that you can see, for example, Cassandra Clare, which is my favorite author. You can also think maybe Carissa Broadbent for the Serpent and the Wings of Night series, Crowns of Nyaxia series. Those are very books, and a lot of the books that have been and are starting to get translated to Portuguese that I just want to mention because I thought it would be important to mention them. Although they were not translated all at the same time and by the same person, definitely, because they have, if I'm not wrong, they are published by all different publishers. They all have something in common. They were famous enough and enough people wanted to read them so that the publishers made their jobs to have these books translated. Which makes me want to talk about the next topic, which is going to be the accessibility on works we want to read. When I started to read, we had a lot of variety of books for kids, especially a lot of Portuguese authors write kids' books and middle grade books, which is something that is quite interesting. I would say so myself after I analyzed which books our authors here in Portugal do put. Honestly, as I said, this is why a lot of our bookshops, they are the main demographic for them. So just to give you an example, a lot of, like, let's say if your kid has a birthday party, you most likely will give the kid that of the birthday and the birthday boy or the birthday girl a book. While I was growing up, I did receive a lot of books from my friends when it was my birthday, which was 2 days ago if you did not know. And that is just something that caught my attention. Why are our libraries and our bookshops mainly targeted to those demographics, so kids and middle grades? Well, actually they are now expanding, which is quite good, but this is not what we are talking about here. So while I was growing up, my interest in a lot of the books was and started to be a lot smaller because I did not have books that I wanted to read at the time that were for my demographic in the bookshops that I have here around my town. Also, I do live in a small town, so we only have like one bookshop by the time I was growing up, which did not provide me a lot of variety, and the library in here also does not have a big variety, and the variety that they have, it's either classics, which I was not interested in reading at the time, or little kids books, which once more were no longer my demographic at the time. So since I was not finding the books that I wanted to read or that were for my demographic, finally when the idea of reading in English came to me, I had a whole new world to explore. I started with the books that were the most popular and the most known at the time, and since then I have been expanding and looking for some more books to read actually, which makes me realize the accessibility for books is very, very small when it comes to translated books. Either we do not have the book yet translated to our main language, or the publishers are not even thinking in translating them. Or even in some cases where we know English, we do not have access to the books in some our local bookstores. We have very limited selection, and in those type of situations we either have to go online, which is the one that I use the most, or we have to go to the bigger cities and search for them and search for the locations that they have in there. For example, Fnac has a big variety of books, but I don't have one in my town. The closest one is maybe 1 hour away, which sometimes it's not worth to take the trip if you just want to get one book, so you end up ordering it online. Where I want to go with saying this is, it's not easy to have access to the books we see everyone talking about. Let's say, for example, Onyx Storm. Since it is a very, very famous book, the publisher here in Portugal, they made the decision to have the book already translated when it was released. So the Portuguese edition was released at the same time as everyone else's edition, which is very nice. But what if it hadn't been such a famous book? What if it was a book like, let's say, Phantasma? The book is very famous, especially in English, but is not yet translated, and it makes that the people that cannot read in English, so they either do not understand English or do not have enough vocabulary to fully understand the book, they will have a hard time keeping up, if wanted, with the hype. But at the same time, when the book is then finally translated, they might no longer want to read it because, let's say, for example, it's not of their interest anymore. Time frames make it very hard to keep up with everyone else and the hype. But not only that, when we talk about accessibility, we also have to look into what language books are being translated. Portugal, as you might know, but if you don't, it's fine. We are a very, very, very small country. So a lot of the times, books that are being translated to other languages are still in the process either to be accepted to our language or being translated to it. But the same does not come, for example, when it comes to Brazilian Portuguese. Due to the amount of people that live in that country, compared to Portugal, books get translated a lot faster and a lot sooner to Brazilian Portuguese than to European Portuguese, since the market itself is also a lot bigger and a lot more people are interested in it, which honestly makes me sad because we are also people, we also want to read in our own language. So in this instance, I do believe that at a certain point we should have the possibility, let's say publishers should put out polls of what books we would like to be translated. I think that would make not only the interesting a lot more thoughtful and thinking a lot more on the people that are going to buy the books, so the readers, but also it would be making it a lot more interactive with the public, which I would think it was amazing. So this actually leads me to my next point, which is when books are translated too fast, the same that when they are written too fast. Let's talk about Iron Flame, shall we? So what about the quality of the translation? Well, when it comes to quality, we do have to understand one thing first. Yes, translation is really that translation for translating a book from one language to another, but we cannot forget one thing. Languages are not exact replicas of each other. Sometimes the way you say something in English will not be the way that you say the same thing in, let's say, Portuguese, Italian, Japanese, and many other languages. What I mean with this is, at a point, a translation also comes as an interpretation of the work from the people that is translating it. and in there we input the identity of the translation, especially the ones that have been doing it for a long time. If you read a lot of books by the same publisher, at some point you will be reading from the same translator over and over and over again, and you will most likely start to notice the way that they write certain things, either it be a specific phrase, a specific moment, or even interpret the books that they are translating, which I do not believe that this is bad, but sometimes it's something that we have to keep in mind, that we are not reading the original words that the author wrote, but actually an interpretation of them, which also leads me to talk about bad translations and bad revisions. So I have read some books in Portuguese that I also have read in English. For example, having Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of them, and I really believe that that book is a really good translation of what the author originally intended for the book. But there are also cases where this is not the situation. The translator makes mistakes, not only in spelling but also in phrase writing, so semantic, which is not good, and I have seen a lot of readers criticize books because of the way that they were translated. Yes, this is something that happens. I have seen quite a few videos on TikTok where the people is talking bad. I do not believe it's about the book itself, but obviously this will lead them to leave a bad review of the book because there was no care with making the translations, which I do believe that when you are translating a book, it's the most important thing and the most important aspect in doing your job well. So translating a book, it's all about the little details. It's all about making sure you have everything correct and not at a certain point start to mix two languages, because yes, that happens, especially when it comes to Portuguese. So in a language such as Portuguese, where you in a minute can be speaking with someone that speaks European Portuguese, just like myself, and in the next one you can be speaking with someone that is speaking Brazilian Portuguese, it starts to get hard to fully just follow one of them, and they start to mix, which is normal between languages, and since we are living together, these type of things happen. But when it comes to official documents such as books, it is something that is very off-putting and will be hardly criticized. When I was in university, all of our teachers told me you either write in European Portuguese or Brazilian Portuguese. You have to choose one of them. You cannot mix them because you will be discounted. And in books, you will be criticized if we do notice that throughout all of the book you are writing in European Portuguese, but then one sentence out of nowhere comes in Brazilian Portuguese. And this is something that readers do not want to read something in their own language that is badly written, especially if we can notice that mistake. I have seen videos, as I've said before, on TikTok of readers commenting on how bad a book is translated and how many errors there are in it, and how they will share it with the publisher directly because they do not accept that quality of the work. It makes the translator seem uninterested in what they are doing and makes them look like they did not make enough research to be sure of what they are translating, but at the same time makes the publisher seem not interested in the works that they are putting out and not worried with revising them, making it look like that they are only interested on the revenues at the start of the publisher moment, so when the book comes out in that language, and not in a long-term scenario. Well, since we are at this moment talking about revenues, it reminds me I also need to talk about my preference when it comes to translated books and which ones I'd tend to buy. So in this situation there are a few things that I have to take into account. One of them is the title that I want to get, if it is available in my main language, which is Portuguese, or if there are some instances where there isn't translated to my language. For example, I have recently purchased Phantasma, which is a book I have mentioned before, in English, and that book is at the moment sadly not translated to Portuguese, and was actually rather hard for me to find it in my own bookstores and in the locations that I have accessible to me, especially the ones online, because I do tend to not buy from Amazon if I can. The other thing I also have into account when choosing the copy that I want to get, it's the price of them. So if you do not know, translated books tend to be a lot more pricey than original written books. So I can get a translated book from to Portuguese at about 20 euros, whereas a English book normally tends to cost me 10 to 12 to even 15 maximum euros, which yes, it's not a big difference, but in the long run, if you are buying as many books as I intend to buy and I still want to get more, this comes out at a bigger cost. And since I do know English, I normally tend to get them in English, but I will get there in a minute, but let me just finish my point in this situation. As I was saying, price is a big point when I'm choosing my books. So honestly, this is one of the most important things that I have into account when choosing them. Since although I work a full-time job at the moment, I always try to purchase the ones that are the most convenient to me at the time that I'm intending to purchase them. As I was saying, this is something that makes my final answer unknown. Since I myself cannot decide if I do prefer to purchase them in Portuguese or in English, because both of them have their pros and cons, but I have been trying to get more of the Portuguese works lately, but at the same time I have to have so many things into consideration when I purchase books that the majority of the time, because I know how to speak and understand and read English at almost a native level, it makes me double check what it's worth and what it's not, especially when it comes to purchasing books. But I have been talking here for such a long time. Well, at least it has looked for such a long time, and I don't think I have come to my most important topic, which is why are translated works so important. My main goal and my main take on everything that I've searched for and everything that has came out of my mind is translated works are important because they make books accessible to everyone. They make books accessible to little kids who do not know how to speak English. They make books accessible to teens who want to delve and to read more. They make books accessible to adults which they might not know how to speak English. They might not know how to read other languages than their own, and also they make books accessible to elder people, which once more a lot of our elders here in Portugal, unfortunately, they did not have the biggest education because of the times that they grew up, but they are still worth and they do still deserve to be able to read the books and the works and what authors put out for them to read. So I think that is the main importance of a translated work, is for the work itself to be spread around the world and spread widely so everyone can enjoy the book. Sometimes even, let's talk about Twisted Love, shall we? I do not like that book, but I do know a lot of people that enjoy it. So that is one of the good things about having translated books and translated works, because they are able to then move on from just that little bubble where they were created and get to know all these corners of the world and get to know all and get to reach everyone and anyone around the world that wants to read that book in specific. In the end, as I've said, we are very coming to a close in this situation. In the end, to me, a book is not something just for the ones that can read the main language that it was written in. They are for everyone else, as I've said before. And I, as a person that mostly reads translations, or it has been, or is trying to in this case, I have to remind myself that on top of everything else, I have the responsibility to help our publishers grow and support them so that can bring more titles to us, non-English based readers, which makes me want to let you know that one of my biggest goals, not only for this year, but also for years to come, is that I will be working on from now on, which is I want to read more and support more of the Portuguese industry, and will do whatever and whenever I can do whatever I can, and whatever not I am able to and have access to the works, I will try to get them in my main language. So from now on you might see a lot more Portuguese books involved and me not knowing their English titles, which happens. For example, this book I am reading, it's in Portuguese, the title is Fake Dates in Mooncakes. The title in Portuguese does not have anything to do with Fake Dates in Mooncakes. It's basically like a fun thing where it says a boyfriend to take, please, because they work at a takeout place. Just a outside the parenthesis here, but this makes me think, in the end, should I have a rule for myself when it comes to purchasing books? Should I always prioritize the Portuguese works, or should I just purchase whatever I want? If you understand what I mean, you know? Should I just do not care about that? Should I just purchase and try to purchase when able and when available the Portuguese copy, or should I just be someone that doesn't care about that? But that to me doesn't seem right with the video that I'm posting, because translators, if you do not know, I wanted to be a translator when I was little, so at the moment it doesn't make sense to me to not think about, let me support the industry in Portugal, because they are valuable and they are the ones that are bringing the books to my house and to me, for me to read in my main language, which is amazing. And I think this concludes the book that the video that I wanted to talk about. I think I have mentioned everything that I wanted to mention. I loved doing this video. Let me know if this is the type of content that you enjoy watching. I can try to bring to you some more videos like this if I'm able to. They are a lot for me to work on, because I have to do research, I have to then script the video, because otherwise I will forget. But I had so much fun talking about this and making all of my research and searching and sharing with you a little bit of my opinions and ideals and what I think about translated works. So I think this is it, friends. Until the next time, I hope you have an amazing rest of your day, night, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you all in my next video. So until then, bye, friends.